Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Shahida and I'm the director for the Helena Kennedy Foundation. And a really warm welcome to you all as we officially launch our online mentoring platform, Pushfar. I'm delighted to be joined by Ed Johnson today, who's a co-founder of the mentoring platform, Pushfar. And just so you know, in the session today, we are joined by a number of mentors and mentees, and we also have a number of HKF stand on hand, myself and Rashda. And just to give you a bit of a brief overview of the charity, because I know there's a few people that probably don't know too much about HKF. The charity itself was set up in 1998 in response to learning work support by Baroness Kennedy to take forward the recommendations, because at that time there were over 15 million adults who had access to either few or no formal qualifications. So the then principal of Milton Keynes College, Dr. Anne Lim, then set up the charity and gave one bursary. And then now 24 years later, we give between 70 to 80 bursaries per year. And we've supported about over 2,000 students progress to university. And that's obviously not made a difference to their own lives, but to wider society too. And at this moment, the charity gives bursaries of £250 to individuals. And then alongside the financial support, we also provide them with pastoral support. So that's through a number of workshops and seminars, this mentoring that we do. Due to the current pandemic, we also started hosting some wellbeing sessions as well. If you have any questions or comments, pop them in the chat function, and myself and Rashda will keep an eye on it during the session. And then without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Ed.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, everybody. It is just afternoon. Brilliant to have the opportunity to connect with you all today. I will share my screen, and for the first sort of half of this session, I'm going to go through some mentoring training. So I know some of you are going to be seasoned or experienced mentors. For others of you, it might be the first time mentoring, and for some of you, you might be being mentored. So we're going to talk through some training on both sides, what you can expect from your mentor and or from your mentee. And then we'll go through the platform a bit later on in terms of how we can use the platform for mentoring, and then lots of time at the end for questions as well. So what I will do, as I say, I will share my screen and very briefly, quick introduction. Shahida's done a very good job of that already, but I'm Ed. I'm one of the co-founders of Pushfar. I was looking for a mentor myself a few years ago, which is what drove me to setting up Pushfar, and now we have the pleasure of working with the Helena Kennedy Foundation and lots of other fantastic organizations too to make mentoring thrive. So in terms of what we're going to be doing today for the training portion of this agenda, first thing, we're going to define mentoring. We're going to make sure we're all on the same page with what mentoring is. I'm also going to define reverse mentoring. It's a phrase that you may have heard of before, you may not have done. So I'm going to make sure that you all know what reverse mentoring is as well, because you may come across it in the working world. We'll then talk about the benefits of mentoring on both sides. There are just as many benefits to the mentor as the mentee. And if you are a mentor, it's important to know what the benefits are for your mentee as well as yourself, and vice versa. After that, we'll talk about your role on both sides. So as a mentor, what you can expect from your mentee and what you should be doing yourself as you're going through that process, and equally as the mentee, what you should be doing going through that mentoring journey. We'll then talk about, and slightly negative, but we'll put a positive spin on it, potential pitfalls of mentoring. So commonly made mistakes that we see happening in mentoring. Some of them are made with the best of intentions in the world. They are easy to make. I'll be honest and say that I have made some of these mistakes myself in the past. But if we know what they are, that'll help us to avoid making those mistakes. We'll then talk about asking the right questions. So sometimes people get into a mentoring relationship, but actually need a bit of guidance in terms of building that rapport and starting those conversations with your fellow mentor or mentee. So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks or some guidance on some questions that you might want to ask at the start of the mentoring journey. We're going to wrap that all up with a quick guide to success. So how you should structure meetings and how you should set yourself up for mentoring success. And then, as I say, we will go through an overview of Pushfar's platform itself and some of the things within that you might already have come across, you might not have done though. And so we'll highlight how you can find a mentor or mentee, how you can then schedule your meetings and give your mentoring a bit of a structure to help it on its way. So in terms of definitions, so what is a mentor? Well, one sentence definition that we use is a mentor is someone who shares their knowledge, skills, and or experience to help another to develop and grow. That's it. And I think what's great about mentoring is the fact that we've all probably been mentors, whether we've called it mentoring or not, and or been mentored. And unlike things like coaching, actually mentoring doesn't have qualifications, and it's great that you're all on training. With this training combined with your knowledge, skills, and experience, you can really help someone else to develop and grow. So even for those of you on the call who are mentees, in the case of this program, actually you might want to think about, further on in your career, how you might want to mentor others as well. We do see lots of people who are mentors and mentees longer term too. So that is mentoring. The other definition that's becoming increasingly popular, and the one that I always put on the screen just so that we know about this, is reverse mentoring. Now, reverse mentoring actually isn't really that different from traditional mentoring. But if you hear anyone talking about reverse mentoring, you'll know what it is. So it's when one individual, who's typically considered less experienced, more junior or younger, sharing their knowledge, experience, or skills in a specific area. So for people entering the workplace for the first time, if you've just come out of college or university and you're being asked to reverse mentor a senior leader, you may be asked to reverse mentor someone on trends in technology. So actually, what do you know that maybe senior leaders in a business or an organization don't? It may also be that you're looking at reverse mentoring around diversity and inclusion as well. So actually educating those senior leaders or those senior people in a business in certain challenges that certain individuals may be facing. So if you ever come across the term reverse mentoring, it's that knowledge transfer that's going the other way, essentially. So those are the definitions. In terms of then the benefits, I'm going to start with the benefits to the mentee. And that's the person being mentored. These are potentially the more obvious benefits. And this is by no means an exhaustive list either. So there are just as many benefits on both sides. And lots of other benefits that you may well see coming out from your mentoring conversations. The first benefit for the mentee is that it's advice and guidance to reach objectives. So based on the goals that you're setting and the objectives that you're setting, actually it's having that person who's in your corner who can provide you advice and guidance. They've potentially been in the same situation that you have in the past, and they can really help you through that process of reaching your goals and reaching your objectives. And we'll talk a bit more about objective setting slightly later on. The second thing that it's guidance on is that it's guidance on professional development. A lot of the time we'll want to develop in our career, but we don't necessarily know the best way to do that. We won't know what we should be working towards and what we can be working on ourselves. Again, mentors are often in a perfect position to be able to share that guidance or share that advice and that guidance to help us with our professional development. Third thing is it's an improved working world understanding. Your mentor is going to have experience from different sectors, different industries, the working world, actually sharing that with you so you can understand certain challenges that you may come up against, certain situations and scenarios, really valuable and really helping a mentee to understand the working world and what's going on in that working world. The fourth thing, it's an opportunity to learn new skills. Now, you're going to learn new skills in two ways from your mentor, both directly in those mentoring meetings. So mentors share any skills or experience that you can within those meetings. But mentees, you're also going to be able to learn new skills outside the mentoring meetings based on the advice that mentors have shared with you. So it may be that your mentor recommends that you develop certain skills and you can then go and practice and learning those new skills outside the mentoring meetings. And the final one that we see a lot is increasing your confidence. Sometimes people will enter into mentoring relationships with the primary objective being that they are looking to increase their confidence. In other cases, actually, this is just an organic benefit that comes out as a sort of additional perk of mentoring. But having that safe space, that conversation, the room for conversation with that mentor really can increase your confidence. Talking to someone who's been in that situation or a similar position to you in the past, who can guide you through any challenges that you might be coming up against, will organically increase confidence over time. So there we go. There are just 5 benefits to the mentee. just as many benefits to the mentor now. So the first one for the mentor, and the first reason why we see lots of people going into mentoring, is actually it's a great way of improving interpersonal skills. For mentors on the call, you may well be asked challenging or tricky, thought-provoking questions by your mentee from time to time. Actually, working out the right way to convey responses can be really valuable. I know that certainly after mentoring meetings with my mentees, I feel a lot more able to handle conversations. So actually improving interpersonal skills naturally over time is one of the key benefits that we see. The second thing, it's very much two-way, and I know this from my personal experience as a mentoring. You really can learn a lot from your mentees. So think about actually what your mentee is bringing to the table. Think about the work that you do or the work that you've been doing, and actually how your mentees' insights can help you to develop and learn, whether that's in things like technological trends or things like the working world and different ways in which you can go about achieving certain things. So be aware of that and be open to learning from your mentee. And for mentees on the call, and think about what you can bring to your mentoring meetings to share with your mentors as well. That'll help them too. Third thing, again, and I said this on the mentee side of things, but this very much goes both ways. It's an improved working world understanding. As a mentor, you're going to understand about different perspectives, what's maybe facing the mentees, what they're coming up against in their career, and that may well unlock additional opportunities and the ability for you to think about how you can improve certain things in your own career. So it's that improved working world understanding, getting different perspectives from different people in different situations and circumstances. The fourth thing, it's improved leadership skills. We know that some of the best mentors are fantastic leaders, but we also know that there are some brilliant mentors who want to become leaders, who want to be people managers, and they see mentoring as a great way of starting that leadership journey. So for mentors on the call who are looking to become people leaders or team leaders, mentoring is a great way of doing that. And the final one that I always put on the screen, which is a bit of a cliche, but it's absolutely true, is that it really can make a difference to someone's career. And that can be incredibly rewarding. We often hear from mentees who will talk about a mentor from sort of 5 or 10 or even 20 years ago, who is citing their mentor as being crucial to their career success. And if you could be that person, then why wouldn't you? It's a brilliant thing to be able to do. And as I say, incredibly rewarding. There we go, some of the benefits. And for mentees on the call, it's important you know these, so you can be aware of those as you're going into those meetings with your mentor as well. So your role on both sides, what does that actually look like when you start to go into that mentoring relationship, when you start to go into that mentoring journey? There are a few things that you need to be doing on both sides. We typically recommend that the mentoring is led by the mentee. So the person who is being mentored should be driving that mentoring relationship forward. And there are some key components that go into that. The first one, this may sound obvious, but there are some things that go into this. It's starting your mentoring journey. So having a think about where you want to be in 6 to 12 months' time, what your key objectives and goals are, what is it that you think a mentor can help you with, and starting to visualize that and getting that support in place can be really valuable as you go into the mentoring relationship. So think about who the right individual for you might be, the sort of experience you're hoping that they've got, and what your goals and objectives are and what you'd like to achieve from that. There are some people that go into a mentoring relationship thinking I'd like a mentor, but actually don't necessarily know why or what the reasons are behind that. And there are lots of reasons. So it's just about taking the time. It doesn't have to be a lot of time, half an hour, just to think about actually what you want to get out of that. It's then about having the introductory meeting. And in terms of finding the mentor, we'll show you how you can do that on the platform a bit later on. Once you've done that, it's then about the introductory meeting. Now, this is often referred to as the contracting meeting, and this is going to form the basis for your mentoring success, the foundation for your mentoring. So make sure you're having this meeting. Don't skip this part out. And there are 2 things that you should be doing within the mentoring introductory meeting. First of all, setting expectations on both sides. How often are you going to meet? In what medium are you going to meet? What happens if it's not quite right? And best people to go to if it's not quite right, or you've got any concerns about that, are the foundation and Shahida and the team as well. But talking about those things, talking about, how's it going to work? What commitments are we putting into this on both sides? Those are really important things to be talking about up front. And if you have those conversations at the beginning, then you're both going to be on the same page. There'll be no surprises in terms of time commitments. Second thing you should be doing in the introductory meeting is make it really clear what your goals and objectives are. So actually, what is it that as the mentee you would like to get out of the mentoring relationship in the next 6 or 12 months, or even longer term? So actually looking at those goals and objectives, and that's why point number 1 is really important, thinking about that up front. And it maybe you don't necessarily know completely what those goals and objectives are, and that's where the mentor can help distill that down and focus those goals and objectives together in that introductory meeting. Once you've then had that introductory meeting, as the mentee, it should then be about scheduling regular mentoring meetings. Now, ideally, 1 to 2 meetings a month is a good starting point. So actually having a meeting every sort of 3 to 4 weeks. Anything less than every 6 weeks, you're not going to really build up rapport effectively with your mentor. Anything more than every 2 weeks is probably overkill. Now, different things work for different people. So if you've had that introductory meeting and you've set that up front, then you should both be on the same page on that. The other thing that as the mentee you should be doing where possible is setting an agenda for your meetings. I'll talk a bit more later on about how you can set an effective agenda and what might go into that. But if you're setting an agenda up front, it's going to mean that you're making the most of this opportunity with your mentor. And the other thing alongside that agenda is, if possible, set some SMART goals for each of your meetings. So again, ideally 1 to 2 goals between every one of your meetings, and SMART goals. If you've not come across SMART goals yet, this is an acronym. They are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So that's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And there are lots of guides online about setting SMART goals. So try and make sure you're doing that. It is going to mean you're going to make the most of your mentoring meetings. And the final thing that as you should be doing as the mentee, remain curious. Don't be afraid to ask questions. It's a fantastic opportunity. And the mentors on the call, I'm sure you'll agree with me on this, actually, it really is a brilliant opportunity to share your knowledge and your experiences with your mentee. And for mentees, asking those thought-provoking questions can really get those conversations going. So make the most of this opportunity. There we are, 5 key things that as the mentee you should be doing as you're going through the mentoring journey. And these are going to set you up for success in the mentoring relationship. And really, once you've started the mentoring, it's only 4 things. But if you're doing all 4 of these, you'll be off to a great start. The same for the mentor now. So there are a few things that you should be doing as you're going through that mentoring journey. The first thing is be really clear and honest when contracting. If the mentee is saying, actually, I'd really like a meeting every 2 weeks and you can only commit to 1 meeting every 4 weeks, again, have that conversation, be really honest and upfront with them. Equally, if your mentee is asking for advice and guidance on things that you don't necessarily have all the right experience in, or you don't have first-hand experience in, just be honest and say, look, I can help you with these goals and these objectives, but actually this one I'm not best placed for. I don't have personal experience of that. It's far better to do that than to say, yeah, I can help with everything. 3 months down the line, realize you're out of your depths with conversations. So just be honest up front about that. The second thing, be willing to share knowledge, guide, and encourage. There are some people, I'm sure nobody on the call, there are some people that think that knowledge is power and therefore they hold on to that knowledge. They don't want to give that away to anyone else, but actually that limits your own career development. If you're sharing knowledge with others, you end up having conversations that are really interesting and insightful, and actually getting those conversations and dialogue flowing, you end up learning more as a result. So just make sure you are sharing the knowledge that you've gained yourself. And obviously, as you're going through the process of mentoring, make sure you're willing to guide and encourage the mentee as well. Quite obvious, hopefully, but really important to be doing so. Third thing, please provide practical and concrete advice. So mentors, don't guess. And if you're not sure about something, just say. Don't use your mentee as an experiment. And again, I'm sure no one's going to do this on the call, but always worth just highlighting. Provide practical and concrete advice based on what you've seen working in the past. If there's something your mentee's asking you and you've got a good idea, but you haven't necessarily been in that scenario or that situation yourself firsthand, just caveat it and say, look, I haven't been in that situation. If I were you, I'd probably do this. And where possible, signpost them to additional advice and support as well. Fourth thing, provide insights. What have you seen working well in your career? What have you seen maybe not working so well? Provide those real world examples and insights from your own career. And at the same time, also provide an opportunity to reflect. You're going to be sharing a lot of information within these mentoring meetings, and actually having a few moments just to think about what the mentee is asking you and say, actually, do you mind if I just have a couple of minutes to pause and reflect before answering a question? And equally, giving your mentee an opportunity to reflect on the information you've been sharing with them, saying to them, do you need a couple of minutes just to process all of the things I've been saying, can be really, really valuable. I think sometimes people shy away from the idea of silence in meetings. They feel it's slightly uncomfortable, but actually embracing 1 to 2 minutes in a meeting just to think about what's being said can be extremely valuable. If you're part of an organization or a company, role model their values and behaviors. It's just going to put you in the best possible light. Shouldn't really need to say any more than that about that one. And then the 6th point, mentors really try and make sure that you are challenging and questioning the mentee in an open and positive way. Some mentors have a tendency to just say, that's great, fantastic, that's brilliant, well done, heaping on lots of praise and reward. And whilst that's valuable to a certain extent, actually the mentee's not learning as much as if you start thinking about how you potentially look at questioning certain things in a positive and open way and challenging things. So what we mean by challenging and questioning is, that's great, but actually have you considered what other options are available to you? Or have you considered maybe doing this? Or what about, these opportunities as well? So asking those questions, getting the mentee to be thinking about those things can be even more valuable than heaping on loads of praise and reward where they're not actually learning. And then the final thing, provide support and reassurance during change. Just be aware that change happens the whole time. Obviously, change has happened on a global scale over the last couple of years, but actually change happens on an industry level, on a business level, on an individual level as well. So just be aware of any change that might be going on for your mentee, and making sure you are providing that support and reassurance during those mentoring meetings, and you're aware of certain things that are happening. There we are, 7 key things that as mentors you should be doing as you're going through the mentoring journey. I want to now go on to, for the mentors, potential pitfalls. So things that we see sometimes mentors doing that you want to avoid. And for mentees on the call, if you see your mentor doing this, just gently remind them. Obviously, be polite and courteous about that, but just making sure that you're not falling down any of these traps. And as I say, some of these are made with the best intentions of intentions in the world. And the first one is an example of that, and that is problem solving. As tempting as it can be, ultimately, it's not your role to fix the mentee's problems. As you're going through that mentoring relationship, you absolutely can be identifying, quantifying, encouraging reflection, and providing advice. And actually, during those mentoring meetings themselves as well, you can be trying to work towards fixing their problems. But what you don't want to end up doing is having a really long to-do list of basically their work that you're doing on your own on their behalf. So fix problems where you can within the meetings and provide that support and advice for them. But ultimately, the best mentors are those ones who can help their mentee so that they can fix their own challenges or issues that they're going through. So just be mindful of that as you're going through it. Second thing is performance valuation. So mentees may well ask you to sort of pass judgment or evaluate their work, but by default, you shouldn't be evaluating their work. So if you do suspect there's a performance issue, guide them back to their equivalent of a line manager. So if it's someone at university or someone at school or anything like that, just guide the mentee back to the right person who is the person who's ultimately set them the work in the first place. From time to time, if your mentee is asking you for guidance and advice and evaluation of that as well, that's fine, but just be mindful that you shouldn't be doing that as the default stance. Your role isn't as a manager, it's as a mentor, and those are some key differences there. Third thing, so this goes back to what I said in the previous slide, cheerleading. Just be conscious of your mentee coming to you for a bit of a pat on the back continuously, a bit of an ego boost, and while saying that's great, fantastic, and giving that praise and congratulation when it's due. Just be mindful of not going overboard on that, and be continually, questioning and challenging in an open and positive light. Acknowledge growth, show the mentee how to repeat that growth as well. That's really, really important. The fourth thing, personal investigation. For mentors on the call, your role is not as a psychologist or a psychoanalyst. Your role is as a mentor. So there's a grey area and there's a thin line between building up rapport and sharing anecdotes and stories, and actually becoming someone who's delving too deeply into those conversations and asking questions into kind of what's driving or motivating the mentee. So make sure you're not going too far into that sort of personal investigation realm. Again, I'm sure no one's going to do this on the call, but private ego trip. We can occasionally see mentors focusing the mentoring discussions all on them and how wonderful their own career has been. Just make sure that's not you. Focus on what the mentee's goals and objectives are. What is it the mentee wants to get out of this? Limit your stories to building rapport, sharing insights based on what you've seen working, that's linked back always to the mentee and what they want to get out of this. Make sure it's not you spending an hour talking about, as I say, how wonderful your own career is. And then the final one, mentor-led. So as we've talked about, ideally the mentee should be driving and leading this mentoring relationship. As a mentor, absolutely go the extra step when establishing the mentoring relationship. But afterwards, objectives and activities, they should be led by the mentee. So mentees, you should be really focusing on setting those agendas, setting those goals, and going to your mentor, requesting that support in those meetings. 6 key things to avoid doing as you're going through the mentoring journey. I now want to talk about questions to ask on both sides. So for those of you who are starting to get into a mentoring relationship, but actually don't know how to build up rapport in the first place, here are 4 questions for the mentor to ask the mentee, first of all. First one, really simple. What are you looking to gain from being mentored? Great question that hopefully your mentee will have come to the first meeting prepared with some goals and objectives, but actually asking them that question in a slightly different way, rather than saying, what are your goals? Actually saying, what are you looking to gain from being mentored? May well get your mentee thinking about different things that they're looking to achieve in the next 6 or 12 months and what they want to get out of that mentoring relationship. And for mentors, obviously, really important that you know what that is, so you can come to those meetings and provide the best possible guidance and advice throughout that journey. The second thing, what are you finding difficult in your career? So actually, where are there challenges? How can, as a mentor, you help with those as well? These are probably likely to be quite closely linked to the goals and objectives, but it may be, again, you find some additional things that are coming out from those conversations that can help you having additional conversations through that mentoring journey. The third one, this is for people who are in a mentoring relationship and the mentee has 20 goals and objectives, and actually you need to start somewhere. Where do you need the most help? This is all about prioritization. So if a mentee says, I want to achieve these 20 things in the next 6 months, actually, where is it you want the most help? Where are we going to start? Where's the most important thing for you? So prioritizing those goals and objectives and getting you on the starting out on the right goals and objectives. And then the fourth one, what do you think is realistically achievable in the next month? And again, closely linked to sort of prioritization. Actually, what can we do? What can we do in the next month? What can we do in the next 2 months, 6 months? You can change that phrasing around, but what do you think is realistically achievable? And this will really help mentees to feel like they're being held accountable by their mentors. And we know that with things like goal setting, if you're sharing your goals and objectives with other people, you do feel like there's additional accountability and you are therefore more likely to achieve those goals. So what do you think is realistically achievable? We've then got 4 questions that, as the mentee, you might want to ask the mentor as you're going through the mentoring journey. The first one, how did you get to where you are in your career? This is a really lovely question. I think we all take different career paths, and actually asking your mentor this question, you may well discover they've been in different industries, different sectors, different job roles. They may then be able to bring additional things to those mentoring discussions as well. So how did you get to where you are in your career? And for mentees, if you're being mentored by someone who you'd like to be in a similar position to in 10, 20, 30 years, actually asking how did you get to where you are in your career, you can start looking at how you might potentially emulate that career path and those career journeys as well. So a great question to really start building rapport pretty early on. Second one, what are you hoping to get from mentoring me? Lovely question that shows that as the mentee, you are aware that your mentor is giving up time to help support you. And actually, if you're asking the mentor this question, then as the mentee, you can come to those meetings aware of that. And it may well be that your mentor says, well, actually, I just find it incredibly rewarding and satisfying and fantastic to see people develop and grow. That's absolutely a valid reason as to why people mentor. And I know a lot of people do for that reason. But it may well be that the mentor says to you, well, actually, I'd really like to find out a bit more about what different perspectives are like, or what the working world is like as we're for people entering that working world today. So if your mentor says that to you, then as the mentee, you can come prepared to those meetings and share those insights so that your mentor is getting what they would like to out of the mentoring discussions as well. Third question, what would you do to become X in 6 or 12 months? Now, become X could be a role within a business. It could be to become better at a certain skill, whether that's a technical skill or a soft skill. And again, it doesn't need to be 6 or 12 months. It can be 2 or 3 years or 5 years. What would you do to become X in that time? For mentors on the call, this is sometimes quite a challenging question to be asked. This may well be where you want to use that phrase. Do you mind if I have just a couple of minutes to think about the response before I share it with you? And that's absolutely fine to do that. And then the final one is, what would you have done differently in your career? I think we all learn from mistakes that we make. And actually, if we can, as mentors, share that with our mentees to avoid them making the same mistakes, then that's just going to help the mentee develop more effectively and more quickly and efficiently. And it may not be that there are mistakes that have been made, but it may be that as a mentor, you think, actually, I could have done things more efficiently or slightly differently in the past that would have helped me more quickly. So if you can share any of those pearls of wisdom and that insight from your own experiences with your mentee, that's going to just help them to accelerate more quickly and avoid making any of the same mistakes that you've made before. There we go. 4 questions for mentees on the call that you can ask your mentor. So I'm going to now run through a bit of a quick guide to a successful meeting. And then if you are not on mute, if you can be, that'd be amazing. I think there's a bit of feedback. We'll have plenty of time for questions as well. So I'm going to go through a quick guide to a successful meeting, and then we'll go through the platform itself. So some of these things we've already talked about, but just recapping them. Scheduling. Ideally, you should be having monthly mentoring meetings. If possible, schedule those meetings at least 2 weeks in advance. As mentees, that's going to give you time to prepare. And as mentors, it's going to give you the opportunity to think about what you can bring to the table in those meetings and those discussions. In terms of the meetings themselves, location and duration. Really important location-wise, they are private sessions. So they are confidential. You've got the time and the energy to focus on those. So virtual mentoring is brilliant now. We've all got the ability to have mentoring conversations on things like Zoom and Teams. If you are on those calls, just make sure you're in a quiet space where you've actually got the opportunity to really focus in on that conversation. And on that private point, we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment, but everything you discuss should be confidential by default with your mentor or mentee. And in terms of the duration of those meetings, ideally 45 to 60 minutes long. Anything less than 45 minutes, you're probably not going to be able to get into the discussions properly. Anything more than 60 minutes, and you're probably going to lose focus. So 45 to 60 minutes long is optimal. I've been on previous training webinars where I've been asked the question, is it okay to just have a 10 or 15 minute check-in with my mentor? That's absolutely fine as long as the mentor is happy with that as well. But that definitely shouldn't replace the main meeting that you're having each month, the main full-length meeting. So just make sure you are committing the time for that. Clear objectives. In advance of each session, mentees, ideally you need to be planning and agreeing objectives with your mentor. And in terms of a session agenda, a couple of things that you might want to include: a review of actions and learnings from the previous session. So what worked well? What has been a challenge over the last month? What did you learn from the last mentoring meeting that you then took into that month What are you then working towards? It should then be about exploring and reflecting on those key areas of focus. So what are those goals and objectives? What is it you're looking to get out of this in the next month? How can the mentor share guidance and advice to help you to reach those goals and objectives? And if there are challenges over the next month, actually, what is it that the mentor can share to help you overcome those challenges and give you that guidance throughout that process? Third thing, review the ongoing value of the mentoring arrangement. Is it working for both sides? Have you got out of it what you need to, or vice versa? Having that conversation in a really open and transparent way with your mentor or mentee is going to help you to just actually make sure you're having a really effective mentoring relationship. And it may be that the mentee says, do you mind if we have meetings slightly less frequently or slightly more frequently? It may be that both parties feel they've got what they need to out of the mentoring journey so far. So it's far better to, in those cases, wind down the mentoring relationship and potentially look at then another mentor rather than keeping it going indefinitely if it's not quite right. And then finally, agree actions and confirm the next meeting. If you can, confirm the next meeting in your current mentoring meeting. It's just going to make sure it's locked into both people's diaries. It's going to be one less thing that you have to add to your to-do list. Fourth thing, quality conversations. Make sure you're having open, transparent, and honest discussions. Everything you discuss with your mentor or mentee should be confidential as the default stance. If there's anything you do want to talk about outside the mentoring meeting that you have discussed in the meeting, just clear it with your mentor or mentee first. This is particularly important to highlight for mentees as well. I think mentors, hopefully most mentors already take that stance or that approach, but actually it should be both ways. So mentees, just be mindful of that if your mentor is sharing something with you, that you treat it as confidential as the default position there. And the second part of this, allowing space for exploration and reflection, making sure you are giving that time to the mentor or mentee just to think about and process what is being shared in those meetings. Mentoring meetings are actually a really lovely and great way to just stop and focus on your own career development, focus on your own career goals, and for mentors just to take a break from the busy day-to-day life that we so often lead, and just have that hour really focusing on development. So make sure you're making the time for it. And then the final thing, actions and reviews. Mentees, you need to be completing the agreed actions. Mentors, you should be tracking progress. If it's the other way around, then something is going wrong. So make sure it is in this order. Final slide, I did say this was the final one, but this really is the final one, how you can get involved. So first thing, join the Foundation's mentoring platform. And I think a lot of people have already joined that, which is brilliant. And I'm going to show you in a minute how that all works. Review the mentoring guides and resources. So there are a number of mentoring guidelines and resources on the platform. Have a look at these from time to time. Make sure that your mentor or mentee has done the same. Please make sure you're proactively engaging in mentoring. So if you're making the commitment to be a mentor or a mentee, make sure you're then making the time and following up. And then I always end on this one. This really is a cliche, but it's absolutely valid and important. Spread the word about the power of mentoring. If mentors, you're finding it valuable or helpful or rewarding, encourage others to get involved as mentors as well. And if as mentees, you're finding this of value and you're learning a lot from your mentor, get your friends or colleagues and classmates involved in mentoring too. So actually get more people engaged in mentoring and how more people can share more knowledge and help each other. So there we go. That's a bit of an insight and an introductory training session for mentors and mentees. I'm now going to briefly go through some of the key components of the platform itself. And I'll start with the registration step. I think most people have already registered, but if you haven't, I'll cover that off now as well. The profiles that you're going to see on this demo account as well are just that. They are demo profiles and dummy profiles. So there may be some very slight nuances between what you're seeing on my screen and the live version of the platform, but largely speaking, it should be similar. So for mentees and mentors, first step of registration, very straightforward. We ask a few questions like name and email address. And then if you're signing up to mentor others, then the next and final step of registration just asks you a couple of additional questions specific to your preference as a mentor. And again, There are going to be some slight nuances in this from the live version too, but first and foremost, as mentors, we ask you to describe your experience and what you'd like to help mentees with. So have a think about what you've learned in your career and where you feel you could share that with others. Any challenges you've maybe overcome that you're happy to share with mentees as well. And as it says here, using 3 to 4 sentences is a good starting point with this. The second question, how would you prefer to mentor? Definitely select both virtually and in person. That's just going to give you the widest possible number of options when it comes to those mentoring meetings. Third question, what's your mentoring capacity? I know some people are happy to mentor 2 or even 3 people at a time. In other cases, people just want to commit to 1 person at a time. Absolutely fine, whichever you choose. A good rule of thumb, mentors, is that you want to be committing 1 to 2 hours a month per mentoring meeting. Per mentoring relationship. And the final question is, where can you provide support? And we've got a number of different broad soft skills here. Any that you're not confident about mentoring in, just deselect those accordingly. And any that you are, you can check those accordingly as well. And then mentees, if you select that you would like to be mentored, we just ask you the reverse questions. We ask you to describe what you're looking for from a mentor. And again, use 3 to 4 sentences here, thinking about and describing those goals and where you're looking for that mentoring support. And then specifically where you're looking for that mentoring support, using those checkboxes that are set up at program level. And then once you've been approved onto the system, mentees, you're going to see a list of up to 5 proposed mentors. Now, these suggested mentors from the foundation are looking at things like who's available first and foremost, but also these key focus areas and keyword relevance too. So with any suggested match, you can see a bit of information about someone. You do have the ability to then view their profile, and I'll show you profile pages in a moment. Just for the purposes of the demo, assuming that we think Will looks like a good match for us, we can request Will to be our mentor. We can then set the expectation. So we can tell Will what we're looking for. We can include an introductory message, and we can also say how long we'd like to be mentored for and how often we'd like to meet or speak during that time. Now, if you're not sure, you can select indefinitely, and that will just keep it going for as long as you're getting value from it. And again, in terms of how often would you like to meet or speak, again, if you're not sure, you can select flexibly here. When you request an individual, they'll receive an email letting them know they've been requested. So mentors on the call, look out for an email from Pushfar when you are being requested. You will then have the ability to log in and respond to that mentoring request. Please make sure you're taking action and you are responding accordingly. Really important to do so. And what I'll do now is I'll go through how people can then manage their mentoring relationships. So the orange box at the top on the homepage will guide every one of you through the most important next action. So if it's time to schedule your first meeting, if you're overdue a meeting, if it's time to provide feedback, this is just going to prompt you to take action accordingly. Below that, you can then see any active mentoring relationships that you're in. So in this demo account, I can see that I'm actually both a mentor and a mentee, but for most of you on the call, as mentors, you're going to see your mentee or mentees, and as mentees, you're going to see your mentor here. One other thing on the homepage just to highlight, you've got the goal tracking on the right-hand side. So mentees, make sure you're using this. You can add a goal at any time by pressing the plus button in the bottom right-hand corner. You can give your goal a title, a deadline, and the visibility. Try and set 1 to 2 goals a month. Try and keep to them and work towards them. It's just going to give you a bit more to talk about in those mentoring meetings with your mentor. If we then schedule a meeting or view the details now of one of our mentoring relationships, this opens up our mentoring management panel. And both parties, both the mentor and the mentee, will have a similar view. You'll be able to send your mentor or mentee a direct message, and it will also send an email alert. So even if you're not logged into the system, you're going to receive those reminder emails or those emails from time to time. So keep an eye out for those. You can then see things like the date of your last meeting, total meetings you've had, number of goals that you've set and completed, and you can also log any notes or objectives that you're working towards. We find that sometimes it's helpful for mentors and mentees to keep this panel open, so you can actually log meeting notes as you're going through that process with your mentor or mentee. And then below that, you can also see any upcoming meetings that you've scheduled through the platform. and you can schedule a new meeting. And you can see past meetings, and you can schedule a new meeting through the platform as well. When you are scheduling meetings, it will send a calendar invitation out via Outlook and Google Calendars. So regardless of which calendar system you're using, you've got that ability. You can also choose the meeting type. So we've got built-in video calling within Pushfar that you can use, or you can use something like Zoom or Teams if that's approved within your network already. Last couple of pages that I just want to briefly highlight. Every individual will have their own profile page. So you can actually view other mentors and mentees profiles within the Helena Kennedy Foundation. You can see a bit of information about someone, and for mentors and mentees, make sure you are adding details that you want to on your profile. If you feel comfortable doing so, add a profile picture. It'll immediately make you more personable and approachable. And then you can also send direct messages to fellow mentors and mentees. So as mentors on the call, if you want to share insights with other mentors, you can absolutely do that. And then the final page, just on the demo that I want to highlight, is the resources hub. So clicking on the light bulb icon, this opens up a number of mentoring resources such as guidelines. Have a look through these from time to time just to refresh your memory and make sure that your corresponding mentor or mentee is doing the same. And that really is an overview of the platform and an introduction to mentoring. I'll hand over to Shahida now, and any questions that anyone might have.
Wow, Ed, thank you so much. That was a great insight. If anyone has got any questions, do indicate with the hand. But I know we've had a question already. Oh, someone's asked, were you able to share the slides at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So Shahida, I'll send them over to you after this, and then if you can distribute them out.
Great. Okay, wonderful. Okay, thanks, Maya. Maya did have a question, but you've already answered it, Ed. And I'm glad you mentioned the point about going with different mentors. I know when I've been mentored, I've worked with someone, and then time came to, done whatever you can, but then maybe it's time to move on to a different mentor, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you mentioned earlier, if there's any issues or anything, then get in touch with us. If something does happen where you're not comfortable speaking to your mentor, then we're happy to always relay the message. If you don't vibe or you just don't click, and that does happen, just get in touch with the foundation and we can always relay the messages as well. Right, let's have a look. Thank you, Mark. Great comment. Yeah, it was thought-provoking, actually. Thank you. Has anyone? Oh, Jane's raised her hand. Jane, if you can unmute yourself and you can.
Hi, interesting presentation. Thank you very much. Any mentoring I've done, I'm not particularly talking about Helena Kennedy Foundation, but in general, is not nearly as structured and goal-oriented. It feels very, very formal. And my style has tended to be a bit more relaxed than every meeting is two goals, how are you getting on? So it's something certainly for me to think about in relation to people that I'm mentoring. But I think one issue that feels very different for me is in kind of mentoring people who are studying rather than career developing. Feels quite different in terms of, or a little different in terms of the kinds of goals you set and how useful I may feel as a mentor if I'm mentoring somebody whose subject is not my own. So it does feel educational. Mentoring when somebody's doing a course does feel slightly different. So I'm interested in your comments about that.
Yeah, great question, Jane. Shahida, do you want to answer a bit about it, or shall I dive in straight away?
Dive in. I will say as well.
Fine. So Jane, I think two things there. I suppose from my experience mentoring students that I have done when I've been mentoring students in the past, actually a lot of the time they'll be both studying but also looking at their own career as well already. So actually having those conversations and getting started already even whilst they're still studying is valuable. I think to your point about the style being of structure and things, this is very much just to make sure that both the mentor and the mentee are getting the most out of it. If you've got a more a sort of less like a less structured approach to mentoring that works better for you and your mentee, then that's absolutely fine to do as well. And we know that every mentoring relationship is going to be slightly different, and it may not be that you want to set 1 to 2 goals each month. You'd rather have those conversations in a more fluid way, then that's absolutely fine to do as well. This is very much just tips to help people if it's their first time mentoring, but it sounds like, Jane, you're a seasoned mentor already and you've got a technique that works for you. So absolutely, that's fine to do that as well. But I think it goes back to that point at the beginning, having that introductory or that contracting meeting, talk to your mentee and you know, work out what works best for both of you, because it may be that the mentee does want to set goals and objectives and they do want to come to you with them. The thing about mentoring is we would say that it's typically led by the mentee. So actually, you know, if they don't want to set their goals, or they don't want to set any goals, but they want to have those conversations with you on a monthly basis, then that's absolutely fine too. Does that make sense, Jane?
Jane's muted. So yeah, just to add to that as well, I've been in both positions where I've had goals set and done it, you know, had more looser conversations. I must admit that when I've had to set the goals, or just at least decide, you know, what's on the agenda, what we're going to be talking about at that particular meeting, it kind of gives you more focus. But I think it does depend on the person as well, and how the mentoring is going, and then go with that. But just go, I guess you because you're in that position as well, with the mentoring relationship, so you know, just see how it feels right to you as well. We have had another question, but I think also links back to the point you just made just now as well. One of the bursary winners asked if there's a nursing mentor, and I'd be interested in your comments on this as well, Ed, that I presume is because this student is studying nursing, that it makes sense to have a nursing mentor. But do you think it's always imperative to have, you know, match a nursing student with a nursing mentor? I think sometimes it's an advantage because they're not from that field, but obviously it does have its advantages as well.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in some cases actually can be really valuable and advantageous to have a mentor who's in a completely different industry, in a different sector. If you're looking at things like soft skills, if you're looking at things like actually preparing for interviews and things, then actually having someone who's in a different sector and a different industry can be really valuable, because you're going to get that outside perspective. So looking at things like soft skills, presentation training, communication, learning, you know, project management, how you structure your time, all of those things you can be mentored on from someone who's in a different industry. If there's obviously things that you'd like to be mentored on that are more specific to nursing, that someone who's outside nursing is not going to know about, then obviously trying to find a mentor who's in that sector is going to be valuable too. But I think there are just as many goals that you can be setting with your mentor or mentee, or things you can be working towards with your mentor who's in a different sector. So it may be that you look at having both potentially.
Yeah, and I'd say don't hold back as well. If that's the, you know, if you can't access a nursing mentor, still do get yourself a mentor, because there'll be a number of other skills that they can support you on. So don't not get a mentor for that reason. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope you did find it really useful. I know I certainly did. I've been doing mentoring, being a mentee and mentor for a number of years as well. I've learned something new. But if you haven't got any questions, get in touch with myself, Rashida, at the office, and we'll send a copy of these slides and the presentation after this as well. And then, yeah, have a great rest of the day, whatever you're doing. Thank you very much.